speaking of across sectors, resilience. You've said it, we're talking about it, we're a resilience platform. Of course, it's in our branding a lot. It's a word that's coming up more and more, both on the private and public side.
Yeah.
Why do you think now this concept of resiliency is so important? And maybe to go further, what does it mean to you?
So resilience actually is one of those words that means different things to different people, because you can talk about resiliency in terms of a bridge's resiliency to an ice storm or heat expansion or so forth. Or you can talk about resiliency. We're sitting here in New Orleans, right? New Orleans was recently hit by Hurricane Ida several years ago, and Katrina before that. Everyone was exposed. Certain people have sensitivity, but resiliency can be defined as who has the ability to bounce back. And some of us have the ability to bounce back. If hurricanes approaching us today, I've got the means to get my family and go inland 100 miles to a hotel if I need to. Many people don't. So that's a moniker of resiliency as well. But I think in terms of this broader discussion about resiliency and where organizations like yours can help, is that we need a national conversation and framework around resiliency. I think Pew recently published some work looking at various states and their resiliency grades, and they were graded from A to F. And so I think there were buzzwords out there on adaptation, mitigation, sustainability, but I think we need to have a national conversation about a sort of a clear understanding of what we all mean by resiliency in a larger term space and how we get there.
Makes total sense. And to go deeper, maybe why now? Is it just that weather volatility finally
why
is reaching
now?
everyone? Yeah.
You know why now. Come on, we're seeing Hurricane Helene and dipole weather events causing wildfires in California like I've never seen. And I know you're being facetious there. But the reality is, I am not, if anybody has followed my career, I'm not an alarmist. I'm not hyperbolic. I can't even say that word today, hyperbolic. But the reality is, we're seeing things that I've been in this field. I'm not the most senior person walking this hall, but I've been around long enough to know that I haven't seen anything like what we've seen in California. I haven't seen anything like what I just saw with Hurricane Helene. I have rarely seen anything like those floods I saw in Spain last year. So we're seeing a different type of event. I co-authored a report recently for the National Academies. And one of the things that we found in that report is that people have benchmarks in their mind. Oh, I remember Hurricane so-and-so, or I remember that heat wave, or I remember that flood. Those aren't representative of this weather anymore. And that's important because it informs how they make decisions at the local household level, but also even stakeholders and decision makers within government, because they may have a reference point of a Katrina or a Harvey, but a Helene might be something very different. And so we need to adjust our resiliency framework to understand that it's a bit dated. I'll give you one more example since we're in New Orleans. There's a contraflow or counterflow process whereby decision makers in places like New Orleans need like 3 days, 72 hours to make a decision about a uniform evacuation and reverse the flow on interstates. We're in an era where hurricanes are rapidly intensifying. We may not have 3 days. That storm might be a Cat 1 when you go to bed, and it's Cat 3 when you wake up. So we need a paradigm shift in terms of our decision-making process and our resiliency frameworks.